This is the, can you see this? This is the, what you call the electromagnetic spectrum. You understand? That is the range of frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. All right, and ultraviolet is here. If you go this way, it is high frequency and short wavelength. You understand? And if you go this way, it is low frequency and long wavelength. Do you understand? So you can see this as something like a kind of light or radiation. Okay? So there's ultraviolet, visible light. This part is what you see as colors. Do you understand? This type of the radiation, the light, all right? And here is infrared. Infrared is the part with low frequencies, lower frequencies than visible light. And you can see this radiation only with a special equipment. Do you understand? Okay. And if you go here, there's terahertz waves, okay? And microwaves and radio waves. They are lower frequencies and have a longer wavelength. And if you go this way, there's the X-ray, and then you go, and then you have a gamma ray. Do you understand? They are higher frequencies and shorter wavelengths. Do you understand? Okay. And the radiation from here, from high ultraviolet to X-rays and gamma rays, these are ionizing radiation. Do you understand? It means they have enough energy to ionize an atom, which causes chemical reaction and which can be harmful to you. Do you understand? But from visible light and under, it's called the non-ionizing radiation, which don't have those kind of effects. You understand? Okay, you get that? So like in visible light, there's the colors of the rainbow here. You understand? Okay. Ultraviolet radiation. What is radiation? Radiation is energy coming out from a source, especially heat, right? From the sun. Too. Also, extreme heat upon entering Earth's atmosphere. The bacteria would have to survive extreme heat. What does that mean, extreme? Extreme is very great in degree or quantity, okay? Extreme heat upon entering. What does that mean, upon? Upon means when, all right? Or right after, immediately after entering Earth's atmosphere. Well, some Swiss and German scientists set out to prove bacteria could travel long distances and survive. Swiss and German scientists set out. What does that mean? Set out means started to, okay? Started to prove bacteria could travel long distances and survive. They examined some dust particles collected by Charles Darwin during his travels more than a century ago. They examined, what does examine mean? Examine means to look carefully at something, all right? Some dust particles. What's a dust? Dust is small, dry particles of earth or sand, all right? Dust particles. What's a particle? Particle is a very small piece of something, all right? collected by Charles Darwin. Who's this? This is a scientist, okay, who developed a theory about evolution. Understand? Evolution of the living things, and he wrote the famous book, of which the name is The Origins of Species. Okay, and you should all know who he is. Okay. During his travels, what does during mean? During means at the period of, alright? His travels more than a century ago. They conducted experiments on the bacteria that had gotten attached to the spores. They conducted, what does that mean, conduct? Conduct means to organize and carry out an action or a plan, okay? Experiments. What's an experiment? Experiment is a scientific test, okay, to discover what happens to something in a certain condition, okay? Experiments on the bacteria that had gotten attached to the spores. Here's what they learned. Those bacteria spores had traveled to other continents and had lived for at least 2 centuries. Had traveled to other continents. What's a continent? Continent is a large area of land, okay, such as Asia or Africa, which consists of different countries, several different countries, okay? And had lived for at least, what does that mean, at least? At least means the lowest possible number, okay? And usually the number is more than this, okay? It suggests that. Okay, let's move on to the next part.
And had lived for at least 2 centuries. Later, they devised some experiments that replicated the conditions of a meteoroid leaving its home world and coming to Earth. They attached millions of bacteria spores to various materials and subjected the material to tests. Some tests were done under ultraviolet light like the sun's. Others were done using high-impact devices to crush the spores. Many spores survived these impact tests. Yet the ultraviolet light test results were different. In one test, millions of spores were brought into space on a Russian spacecraft. When released in space without being attached to anything, they all died. However, when mixed with red sandstone and similar material that has been collected from meteoroids from Mars, some spores survived exposure to ultraviolet light. That's not a definitive study, of course. The main reason is that the spores were exposed.
Okay, what is this part about? This part is about scientists doing some experiment, okay, that replicated means that copied the conditions, okay, of a myriad leaving its home world and coming to Earth. So they copied, okay, replicated the conditions and saw what happened to the bacteria. They attached a lot of bacteria to various materials and did some tests, okay? And the tests were done under ultraviolet light or using high impact devices. A lot of spores survived the impact tests, but in the case of ultraviolet, the results were different. In one test, those bacteria were not attached to any material. In that test, the bacteria died, all right? And in another test, they attached the bacteria to the materials similar to what are in a meteorite. You understand? And then they discovered that a lot of spores had survived. You understand? That's the content of this part. Later, they devised some experiments that replicated the conditions of a meteoroid leaving its homeworld and coming to Earth. Later, they devised. What does that mean, devise? Devise means to think of an idea to do something and design it. You understand? That's devising. They devised some experiments that replicated the conditions of a meteoroid. Replicate, what does that mean? Replicate means to make the same thing, copy, okay? There's a similar word you have to know. Duplicate, replicate means make the same thing. Replicated the conditions. What's the condition? Condition is the state of something, all right? Conditions of a meteoroid leaving its homeworld and coming to Earth. They attached millions of bacteria spores to various materials and subjected the material to tests. They attached millions of bacteria. What is a million? How many zeros in a million? 6, right? Okay. To various materials. What does various mean? Various means there are a lot of different things in a kind, okay? Various materials, that means many different materials, and subjected the material to tests. What does subject mean? Subject means to, if you subject something to something, that means you do something to that. You do something to that. That means you do an experiment on that, or you write about that, or you talk about that. That's a subject, all right? Subjected the material to tests. Some tests were done under ultraviolet light like the sun's. Others were done using high-impact devices to crush the spores. Using high impact. What is impact? Impact is the force with which one thing hits another thing. Okay. The force with which one thing hits another thing is an impact. Okay. All right. High impact devices. What is a device? Device is the verb of devise. You understand? Device. Device is an object which is made for a function or a purpose. Okay. Devise has the meaning of thinking of it and designing it. All right.